If you ever found yourself pondering the question, what if Marvel made a third season of What If, then I have some great news for you. The third and final, for some reason, season of What If has arrived as a Christmas present from Marvel Studios, and I'm not sure if many people actually know this. They haven't exactly given it the strongest marketing push, as a new episode released every day over the last week, but now that it's come to a close, I have a lot of thoughts on the studio's longest running series. Okay, you know what? That feels like enough for an intro. Let me just dive into talking all about this show. Overall, I think Season 3 of What If is pretty good. But here's the thing. I also think that at the same time, it's the weakest of the entire show. Season 2 remains my favorite as it struck the perfect balance of interesting ideas and comic goofiness, along with the fact that it's easily the best animated in the entire show. They had plenty of time to work on the visuals, and trust me, you can tell. While with this season, they only had 1 year for production, and unfortunately, it shows. It's in the little details like walk cycles and general details on character models feeling a little too 3D animated. I've never been the biggest fan of this art style, but to give them their credit, when it works, it really works. What If has always looked gorgeous in their wide shots as they'd let the colors pop and contrast with some striking visuals. But it's in the close-ups where you start to see the cracks. It is what it is, but at least Marvel seems to have learned their lesson with upcoming shows like Eyes of Wakanda and Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, which is great to see. If you don't want to stick around for my in-depth thoughts on each episode, I get it. It's fine. Seriously, I don't mind at all. It's not like I made this video specifically for you or anything. But the gist of the season is that it's a mixed bag of quality. There are some very high points, but in a cruel twist of the monkey's paw, we're also met with some serious lows that stick out like a sore thumb. I think the start and end are the weakest parts, with a pretty strong run in the middle that makes the season worthwhile. Once they hit the ground running, we get some fun ideas that I found myself really enjoying. It's nothing groundbreaking, but it put a smile on my face, and sometimes that's all you really need. I'm very bummed that this is the last season of the show, considering the fact that there are genuinely an infinite number of possibilities for it, and it hasn't reached its full potential yet, but Marvel won't return my calls, so it's not like I can really do anything about it. Even if what we got over these last 3 years was far from perfect, I'm still glad we got it. We got to see some of my favorite characters return in new scenarios that I could have never even dreamed of, for better or for worse. But they gave it a shot, and for that I am grateful. If you're looking for something to watch and are a Marvel fan, I definitely recommend you at least check out any of the episodes that seem interesting to you. But if you aren't the most thrilled about it, you're not going to miss out on much if you skip out on things. Alright, I think that about covers it. So it's time to go through each episode one by one and talk about all those juicy details. Oh, also, for the record, I wrote my review for each of these episodes the day they released, so keep that in mind when I'm saying all this stuff. Alright, here we go. Hit the music! The final season opens up with a very ambitious episode. To be completely upfront about this one, I'm about to be incredibly biased. My journalism teacher would scold me and put me in the corner with a little dunce cap on my head for the amount of bias I'm about to show, but that's what this channel's all about at the end of the day, and she can't stop me anymore. It feels like this episode was made for me, and there are 2 reasons for that. Captain America and Moon Knight, my 2 favorite superheroes, not only coming back to me after actual years of waiting to see them again, but teaming up together? I can excuse a lot of problems when you're catering to me like that, because while I do think this episode is pretty fun, it definitely has a lot of issues. Most of the supporting cast feel like they're there to fill space, rather than getting any individual moments to make them stand out. You could have swapped someone like Shang-Chi out with any other hero, and unfortunately nothing would have changed. It's also maybe the biggest example of the creators working backwards from an idea, then searching for a small change to justify it, but I don't really mind that too much when we're seeing stuff we never could have in live action. Like, seriously, whoever thought we'd see Marvel Power Rangers fight Hulk Godzilla? And why have we not seen that sooner? The episode started out really strong too, with a beautifully animated throwback to old superhero cartoons, which honestly just made me want to see a show in that art style. But the episode's true strengths come in 2 characters, Sam Wilson and Bruce Banner. Despite the short runtime and how they could have used a little more time to explain things, they managed to create a bond between 2 characters who barely interacted in live action that feels genuine and strong. That relationship grounds the episode and is really interesting to see. And I'm not just saying that because Captain America is involved either, okay? I genuinely think they did good with it. It's also just nice to see Sam step up into this leadership role and how that would affect his dynamic with all these other characters. And even if he genuinely had only 3 lines, it's cool seeing Moon Knight casually talk with other MCU heroes. With how self-contained his show was, it gets me even more excited for his future and what we can look forward to when he steps into the grand scheme of this universe. Besides me gushing over my favorite characters, I think this episode is pretty fun but very flawed. They speed through the story a bit and the animation isn't always there, but after genuine years of Marvel not being able to do much with the Hulk, it's very rewarding seeing him take center stage again. I'm always going to enjoy something where Captain America is the lead, especially after all these years of agonizing waiting, so I had a very big smile on my face at the end of this. It won't be everyone's cup of tea, but for those who choose to drink, I think they're going to enjoy it, if that metaphor even makes sense. I don't know. Also, if I had a nickel for every time Captain America stood his ground against a Hulk, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that happened twice, right? I really need to know if that was planned as a precursor to Brave New World, but regardless, I ate up every second of it. This episode feels like a fever dream in the best possible way. If you would have told me that even just a year ago we'd get a crossover between Agatha, the Eternals, and Agent Carter, I would have never believed you and probably locked you up in a padded cell. But 2024 really turned out to be the year of Agatha Harkness, and we are all better off for it. Putting all my biases to the side, I think this episode was much stronger than the premiere. It feels like a complete story, and with a focus on less characters, they each get more room to breathe. The title definitely makes it seem goofier than it actually is because the overall concept is really good. And as one of the few people who actually remembers Agent Carter, I think it's a nice detail that they carried over Howard Stark's love of directing in this way. And while I was concerned that this episode would be a waste of one of the last of the series, I now completely understand why they made it, and I am so glad that they did. It also helps that Kingo and Agatha are a duo I never knew how bad I needed in my life. I loved them together in this. We need to find a way to bring them together in live action or something, because their chemistry here is electric. If this is how we get Eternals 2, I will 100% take that, okay? I will do anything for that movie. What If is at its best, taking things you never would have thought could coexist together and merging them into one thing, and this episode is a prime example of that. It is a ton of fun to mix the magic and cosmic sides of the MCU together and show an alternate take on how the Emergence could have been stopped. And man, it is so nice to see Marvel finally remember the Eternals exist. As probably the biggest Eternals defender on the planet, I can't tell you how long I've waited to see them again. I will die on the hill saying that that movie is peak, and cool people agree, so if you think otherwise, I got some really bad news for you. There's a very big thing that happens at the end of this episode that people are rightfully going to remember most of all, but I want to give some credit to the dance sequence in this because it is really well choreographed. Wait, do they still choreograph dance scenes if they're animated? Or is that up to the storyboard artist? Sorry, that doesn't matter. What's important here is the fact that Agatha turns into a Celestial and throws hands with Arishem. Is that not the most insane thing you've ever heard? And so insane that it actually works? I have to respect a swing like that, especially when it is this enjoyable to watch. And the fact that this episode was secretly a love letter to the connection cinema brings us is really sweet. Nicole Kidman would be proud. If there's one thing we take away from this episode, it's that Agatha Harkness makes everything better. She's 3 for 3 with MCU projects so far. People need to stop doubting her. We might as well make it the Agatha Cinematic Universe from now on. The episode that was supposed to drop last season is finally here. I think it's funny how once a season they have to push an episode back. I have to wonder what didn't make the cut this time around. At this point right now, this is easily my favorite of the first 3 episodes. The concept is incredibly strong and a great use of the what if format. The idea of the Red Guardian stopping the Winter Soldier from killing Tony's parents is fascinating because the ramifications could be drastic for the MCU as a whole. They could have gone so many different ways with it, but I like the route they took. And admittedly, my one big flaw with this episode is that it doesn't really explore that idea as much as I would have liked, but I think that's more of me going into it with the wrong expectations. The title fully made sure to let us know that it'll be about Bucky and Alexei, so once I looked at it through that perspective, I can fully appreciate the episode for how fun it is. Also, Alexei is such a real one for hating capitalism so much. He may be a terrible father, but he's got some great points there. The dynamic between these two morally ambiguous heroes with Russian ties feels like something that should have been explored a long time ago, but I'm very glad we got to see it here. Bucky works so well as the straight man, playing off of Alexei's chaotic energy. They have such a natural dynamic together, and I'm so happy that we're going to see more of them in Thunderbolts. Asterisk. I feel like their interactions are going to be a highlight, and this was a great little taste of that. They play off of each other so well here. I seriously cannot get enough of their bromance. I could listen to them banter for 6 hours straight and never get bored. Especially with things like Alexei constantly bringing up capitalist pigs. It gets funnier every single time. I don't know how they managed to pull it off. Also, the Captain America fan in me has to mention the Coney Island callback being Bucky's only memory, which is something I'm definitely going to be very normal about and not obsess over, I promise. Okay, maybe just a little obsession, because that is such great attention to detail. It's in moments like that where you can see how well thought out their entire story was, and I love the inclusion of Goliath in this. In the actual MCU canon, we know so little about him, so it's nice to see him becoming such a prominent character in What If. Oh, also, America Ferrara is casually in this? Making your MCU debut as a random ranger? That was not on my prediction list, but I mean, sure, why the hell not? Hopefully we can get her in a more prominent role in the future, though. While the episode was far from what I expected, getting to see Bucky and Alexi in this Thelma and Louise-style road trip story taking down Obadiah Stane as the Rook was a blast, and a lesson to me that I gotta let them cook sometimes. There's an easily understandable reason for why it's happening, and that's elevated by a duo with great chemistry together. Every episode in the show should be at least this good. Picture this. It's early Christmas morning. The kids just finished tearing through their presents like wild animals. Dads already have the wrapping paper in the garbage bag. Everyone is having the jolliest day possible. How could they make this holiday better? They put on the new episode of Marvel's What If, a show that's fun for the whole family. And what better way to keep the holiday mood going is by watching Darcy Lewis give birth to Howard the Duck's egg? Hello? How are you just gonna casually open with that? I don't want to think about her, the duck absolutely insane way to start an episode, but it sure did set the tone. When I saw this title on the episode list, I was rightfully concerned. With this being the final season and all, I felt like it would be such a waste to spend an entire episode on a Howard the Duck marriage instead of doing something interesting like what if the other half got snapped. So going into this, they were gonna have their work cut out if they wanted to win me over. But now, here I am, after watching the episode, I can confidently say that it was ridiculous, unserious, and absurd in every sense of the word. And I also kind of loved it. I know, I'm as shocked as you are. I really thought I'd be annoyed at this episode's existence, but I have to respect such an insane pitch like this. I've learned that with this show, it's best to just embrace the absurdity and all that comes with it. The idea of Howard the Duck and Darcy Lewis having a baby with otherworldly cosmic abilities and almost every single Marvel villain hunting them down, along with the fact that it kind of becomes a Christmas story towards the end, means that it should not work in the slightest. Yet somehow, they pulled it off. With something as wild as this, you need to go all out to make it work. And boy, did they do that. From dealing with the Grandmaster, to Dormammu, to Zeus, they went through it all and I could not help but enjoy it. It's nothing to write home about, but it is so much fun, man. I could have never guessed that Darcy birthing Duck Jesus would be this enjoyable of a TV show. It's made even better by an Agent Coulson appearance for all of us Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fans out there. There are still dozens of us, and we will be heard. I wish I had more to say about this whole thing, but I'm still kinda in shock after what I just witnessed, on Christmas Day no less. I watched this episode before celebrating any festivities with my family. I was never able to predict what would happen next, and that was thrilling. Honestly, you should watch this episode if nothing else. Even if you think you're gonna hate it, give it a watch and see the insanity for yourself. I think that the funniest part of this whole episode is that their Messiah kid Birdie is gonna play a huge part in the finale and is played by award-winning actress Natasha Lyonne. God, what an insane world we live in. I would not trade it for anything. Going into the season, this was far and away the episode I was most looking forward to. If you can't tell already, I love the Eternals, so seeing how things could have turned out had the Emergence been a success is a fascinating idea to me. It's the strongest what-if concept in the entire season, and something that fully takes advantage of the initial one small change pitch of the series. And if that wasn't good enough, this was made even better by the fact that they revealed Mysterio was going to be the villain of the episode? My favorite villain of all time? My beloved psychotic man in a fishbowl? Never in my life did I expect to get some kind of Mysterio and Eternals crossover in a sense, but I was absolutely here for it. It's safe to say that I had very high expectations for this episode, and I am so glad to have them met here. As of right now, this is my favorite episode of the season, and one of my favorites of the entire series, to be honest. I absolutely loved everything about this. It's a great example of my bias being rewarded too, as unlike the first episode where my interest in those characters heavily carried my enjoyment, this one uses Mysterio to his full potential. We get to see him in his full dramatic and obsessive glory as he rules over this destroyed Earth with an iron fist and an Iron Legion. I think the strength of this episode is showing how much of a threat Beck could really be with the right resources. He's evolved from more than just illusions as he uses them to catch the Resistance off guard, while the real drones take advantage of the distraction to capture them. Not being able to trust what is and isn't real is amped up here in a really fun way. We even get a classic Mysterio illusion sequence here that gives us a shock twist that I genuinely did not see coming. I'm not gonna spoil it, but if you've already made it this far into the video, you might as well go watch the show. While this season has been a little all over the place to start, I do think that the strength of it has been finally letting us see these new Multiverse Saga characters in the spotlight. It's opened up a whole new world of stories that I'm sure they're going to capitalize on in the future. They definitely wouldn't cancel it after this. But by putting the focus on Riri in this episode, we get to see her character in a new light and grow to appreciate her even more. It highlights how interesting her character can be and gives us a taste of what we can expect going into Ironheart. I need to watch the entire show as soon as possible, man. I am dying to see more of Riri after this. Also, I do think it's very funny that this episode paid off the White Vision. Hold on, we really need to think of a name for him that doesn't sound so intolerant. I think it's very funny that this episode paid off the colorless Vision cliffhanger in WandaVision before the MCU's Sacred Timeline did. It's a really strong episode that takes full advantage of this apocalyptic setting and gives us something we never could have dreamed of in the main MCU timeline. Who would have thought that an episode centered around Riri Williams becoming the White Vision to fight Mysterio would be one of the best things in MCU TV? But hey, I'm here for it. Cowgirl Kate Bishop, hello! Sorry, I just had to get that out of my system right off the bat. It will not happen again. This was the episode I was next most looking forward to because of how great the concept was. I loved the 1602 episode last season, so with this being the spiritual successor, I had high hopes for it. Especially given the fact that it would be centered around one of my favorite characters ever, Kate Bishop, and someone I've been begging to see again in live action, Shang-Chi. It was one of those mashups that I would have never thought of on my own, but I am very grateful to have seen it now. This episode was a rootin' tootin' cowboy shootin' good time, and honestly something I'd love for them to spin off in the future if they're still doing that. I guess it depends on if Marvel Zombies actually ever happens and is successful, but I'd just be so happy to explore how this entire Western universe operates. I am such a sucker for a good Western. I had a whole phase obsessed with cowboys, which you can blame Red Dead Redemption for that, but the point is that I love this genre. Infuse that with superheroes, you better believe I'm already sold. With how overdone the Western genre is, adding in these heroic elements and things like mind control go a long way in breathing new life into it. They really nailed the aesthetic here too. Everyone feels so natural in this new environment. Honestly, someone like Sonny Birch fits in here more than the present day. Like seriously, with a name like Sonny Birch, it feels like he was made to live in the West. Obviously though, Kate and Shang-Chi are the stars of the show, and they make for some incredible cowboys. Especially Kate Bishop. Yes. I really like how they adapted their fighting styles and superhero identities into this environment. Making Shang-Chi's cowboy identity 10 rings and having people summon him by ringing a bell 10 times is such a simple idea, but goes a long way in making him seem like an important badass. And Kate can obviously keep the Hawkeye name as the resident sharpshooter of this justice-slinging duo. The action in this episode is also shockingly good. The sequence with Shang-Chi throwing his hat in the air is the standout of the entire season for me. It's really memorable as you see both characters show off their unique fighting styles. But if for some reason that doesn't sound cool enough to you, what if we threw in a mother effing ghost train ran by the Hood of all characters? A very surprising inclusion considering we haven't even seen him in live action yet, but I guess Ironheart was supposed to release over a year ago at this point, so you know what, screw it, we ball. There's a very interesting reveal with the identity of the Hood that I'm not going to spoil, but the way they handled that story is very well done and surprisingly emotional. It builds off the Shang-Chi lore in a great way, and while I might be a dummy who should have seen it coming, it caught me by surprise. And also, while we're talking about surprises, they snuck an Iron Fist into this? Hello? I had to rewind to my stream to make sure I was hearing things right when Kate directly called it out. It is so goddamn cool that we're finally in a place with the MCU to see references to characters like Iron Fist again after all these years. The only thing I love to see more than that is Cowgirl Kate Bishop. Okay, I'm done for now. For real, I promise. Oh, also, I haven't mentioned it yet, but throughout this season, there's been a common theme of the Watcher interfering more than usual. It's nice to see him grow and realize that he doesn't have to just watch everything, he can try and use these abilities to make the universe a better place. I sure do hope nothing bad happens to him in the future for breaking his sacred oath, because that would be a real shame. Anyways, what's this next episode about? I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't have much to say about this episode at all. Barely anything memorable happened. Like, it was cool to see Storm wield Mjolnir, but it feels like she's from an episode we completely skipped over, and one I would have much rather been watching. And a special shout out to Cohorty because I love her character. I just wish she and Storm had more interesting things to do here. It's probably my least favorite episode of the entire series because there aren't any big twists on the canon or insane ideas. It's just all set up for the finale. It even ends with a to be continued screen and everything. So because of that, I've made the very easy decision to talk about these episodes together. And it's way too late for you to stop me. To make it clear where I stand, I've never been the biggest fan of What If crossing over with itself. I think this show is at its best, telling self-contained stories that change the established canon of the MCU in exciting ways we could have never seen. That being said, I'll always keep my mind open for an interesting idea if they have one. So with this finale being the ultimate What If crossover, I have a lot of conflicting thoughts. I think the first season did finales best in a very natural way that expanded Infinity Ultron and Killmonger's arcs while paying off Strange's, while the season 2 finale was a lot. Then you come to this series finale here, and I wasn't the biggest fan of it. The episode is fine, but when you're cutting this series' life so short, you really have to deliver on a satisfying conclusion. And to their credit, I do think the first half of it and some of the ideas presented were genuinely interesting. The constant through line of this show has always been the Watcher, the omnipotent, bald narrator with a hypnotizingly smooth voice. They've done a really good job handling his arc in a natural way over the last 3 seasons. From intervening to make sure there's a multiverse to watch over, to doing it all the time because why not, I think they've done a great job building that character and seeing his motivations grow over time. Going into this finale, it was clear that things would be about the ethics of watching as the Eminence tries Uatu for his crimes. There's a really interesting debate to be had over the purpose of a Watcher and if interfering is the right way to go. And considering the fact that he saved Madison with 2 N's and 1 Y, but it's not where you think, I personally think he should be allowed to interfere all he wants. This debate very quickly spirals into a ton of flashy, larger-than-life action, which definitely has its moments, as I do enjoy seeing his big, bald baby head throwing hands, but I don't think it's the best way to resolve things. I would have loved it if we were able to let that debate breathe more and actually see these 2 Watchers argue in favor of the right thing to do. Really dive into the ethics of things. Which might be a lot of me to ask for a show that's mostly meant for kids, but I think it would have been more satisfying to have Uatu show the Eminence firsthand the benefits of interfering. They can still fight for a bit to get in that hit of action, but have them crash into a changed universe like Doctor Strange's to show how it was improved firsthand. The finale honestly does a pretty decent job tying together a ton of different elements from throughout the series. Infinity Ultron's turn worked a surprising amount for me and is a great way to bring back those elements from the first season. I just wish he played more into the Eminence decision, as I think seeing someone like him change could have been a huge wake-up call. Where the finale jumped the shark a bit for me, though, is when everyone got Watcher powers and Captain Carter's sacrifice. I'm not a big Captain Carter fan. That character has never moved me. I'm much more of an Agent Carter enjoyer. I'm one of the 6 people who watched those 2 first seasons, and I think she's great in that role. But Captain Carter's just never someone I've been able to get into. So I didn't feel anything during that entire last half of the episode as she stepped up. I'll give them credit that most of the action is pretty spectacular, and they use the freedom of animation very well, but I just would have hoped to be more invested in this. I don't think it's necessarily bad, but I was expecting a lot more. It's definitely better than the Season 2 finale, but it doesn't hit the same way that the first season did. With how they left things off, it feels a lot less conclusive than I was expecting, as if this was the end of one chapter and the beginning of a new one, not the final page in a book like it had been presented as. The crazy montage of ideas at the end only left me wanting more of this show, not content that it's over. Like, seriously, how are you going to show me Samurai Ghost Rider and not expect me to want to see so much more like that? I'm really hopeful this means that they may revisit this show down the line, ideally with a creative team shakeup, rather than say goodbye to this show for good. That may just be my increasing delusion talking though, because with how most other people have received it and the rumored low viewership, this may indeed be the end, which would be a huge shame. Looking at this show as a whole, I think it had more hits than misses, but a wide range in inconsistency. Genuinely some really good and ambitious ideas throughout, but it's also very hard to develop an entire universe in just 22 minutes, so pacing was something they always struggled with. Despite that, they still managed to pull out a few gems here and there. I think straying a bit from the original one small change premise to develop their own identity hurt things, but even those unique and absurd concepts could be really enjoyable. My biggest problem with this show overall is that they tried to connect it way too much. It definitely should have been much more of a strict standalone anthology, because that is where these stories thrive. They shouldn't be trying to force these multiversal crossovers and having a main character. This is a show that should be about visiting new universes each episode. It's a pretty fun series overall that never lived up to its full potential, so I'm sad to see it end. I'm a what if defender, I'll be the first to admit it. I think these episodes are better more often than not and have embraced the absurdity of the comics in a really fun way. I'll also be the first to admit that this show is far from perfect. It's often very messy and doesn't get the time needed to cook, but I'm still glad we got it. There were some genuinely great episodes of the show that made the whole thing worthwhile, and for that, I am grateful to have pondered the question. Although the fact that we didn't get classics like what if the Watcher grew hair, or what if Bruce Banner's pants didn't stretch, or what if the Fantastic Four were bananas is f***ed up. What was even the point? Okay, before we end this thing, let me give you my ranking of every single episode from this season in a very particular order. At number 8, we have What If the Watcher Disappeared. Number 7 is What If, What If. Number 6 is What If the Hulk Fought the Mech Avengers. Number 5 is What If Howard the Duck Got Hitched. Number 4 is What If Agatha Went to Hollywood. Number 3 is What If the Red Guardian Stopped the Winter Soldier. Number 2 is What If 1872. And at number 1, we have What If the Emergence Destroyed the Earth. And there we have it. Feel free to yell at me all you want in the comments about how wrong I was about this season. I would love to hear what everyone has to say and continue the conversation down below. And while you're at it, you may as well like and subscribe to see more videos like this. If you don't do it, I'll ponder the question, what if you started coughing in 4 hours? This is a real threat.